Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in after my week off. Today we're going to be talking about internalized racism and how Black people can internalize racism and perpetuate prejudices. So obviously I'm not Black, so with this video I'm mostly going to be relaying and consolidating information that already exists, but I really hope to further break down the distinctions between racism and prejudice and then really get into what internalized racism is and what it looks like. So I know I say this with almost everything that we talk about, and I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but just like with racism and reverse racism not having a set definition, neither does internalized racism. There isn't one standard definition for what it means because it is very structural and multidimensional, like the definition of racism itself. So it has implications at the individual psychological level that causes issues at the community and meso level with how POC people interact with each other. And then internalized racism also has implications at the macro, institutional, and policy level. Since this video is largely gonna consist of me giving you examples of what internalized racism looks like at the individual and macro levels, I thought that we could start by discussing it using W.E.B. Du Bois's definition or interpretation from his book, The Souls of Black Folk, which he wrote in 1903. So Du Bois discussed this concept of double consciousness, and he defines it as a sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. So if you're a person of color and you've ever thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't wear that hoodie while I go on a walk because I might look suspicious, or I need to cover up my tattoos before I go to XYZ professional place, then you've internalized racism. You're looking at yourself through the eyes of others, particularly the eyes of a dominant white narrative, which defines what's respectable, what's professional, and what's acceptable by society. So let's jump into that psychology further. One of the most famous studies done on internalized racism was called the doll test. It was conducted in the 1940s by Kendrick and Mamie Clark to show the psychological impacts of segregation on Black children. Particularly, it showed the impact of racism on Black children's self-esteems from the internalization of white beauty standards. So I actually want to show a clip from a 2010 study conducted with psychologists and CNN, which showed whether or not these impacts and effects from racism are something that we still see today, which would have been 60 years after the initial study was conducted. I won't know until I edit the video, though, if I've actually succeeded in embedding the video clip into this one. So if I have not succeeded, then you can find the links to the two videos that I'd like you to watch in the description box, and some good timestamps to watch are here. So I'm gonna interject because I forgot to give a content warning when I was recording this clip, but I want to give a trigger warning for racism and internalized racism because this is very sad. So in case my grand plan didn't work out, please take a look at those. I highly suggest that you watch the whole video, but if you don't have the time for that, that's why I've included the timestamps. These clips demonstrate not only the internalization of white beauty standards, but also the internalization of white standards of who's good or who is likable. So the way that that plays out in the real world and the way that this internalization looks like in POC communities, you can see it in colorism in these communities where lighter skinned Black individuals are treated better or favored or seen as more beautiful simply because of the fact that they're lighter complected. And the same goes for Latinx and Asian communities where white Latinx or lighter complected Asian individuals are treated better than their brown or Black counterparts. So I am once again referencing Dr. Stephen Roberts and his research because he has research about people's conceptions of God's race and gender and how that impacts who they think should be in leadership positions or hold power. So in Dr. Stephen Roberts' research, he was looking at, as I mentioned before, how children and adults' perceptions of God's race and gender impact who they think should be in leadership positions. And so it'd be a myriad of different faces of people of different races, genders, and it would ask them who they think should be in leadership after asking them about what they think God looks like. So is God a white man? Is God a Black man? Is God a woman? And all of that would correlate to who they think should hold leadership and power. This might seem a little out of left field with relation to this topic, but I think it's super interesting on its own, but it shows that whatever or whoever we think is the epitome of goodness is who we think should be a leader or have power. Why is my fridge It's been bugging lately. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, but it shows that whoever we think is the epitome of goodness is who we think should have power or be in a leadership position. And as you can see from those clips, many Black children are told or can perceive from the way they view society that white people are the epitome of goodness. And this can have implications later on, because then this impacts how we vote, it impacts the way that we feel about the wage gap between men and women, and it has greater implications beyond just like what it means for the individual. It's also important to remember that this video or those clips didn't only discuss the epitome of goodness, they also talked about who's the epitome of badness. And both the Black and white children endorsed over and over again the US mantra, which I mentioned in my past videos, that Black is bad. The epitome of badness also impacts how people vote. And you can see this in various contexts. So one example that comes to mind is from Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, where he discusses his own endorsement of Black stereotypes on a stage in high school. And he also discusses Black support for initiatives like the War on Crime, which disproportionately harmed rather than helped Black communities. So when Du Bois talks about Black individuals seeing themselves through the eyes of the dominant white narrative, it's important to keep in mind that sometimes people believe what they're seeing from that perspective, but it's more important to know that that's not right or true. Many scholars, from Du Bois to Audre Lorde to Frantz Fanon, have discussed that this isn't merely an issue of low self-esteem and that Black people aren't to blame for buying into this perspective and narrative. Rather, it's a deeper psychological altering that occurs because of a Black individual and other Black individuals being steeped in a society that sees them as less than. This all goes to show that the responsibilities of Black individuals and non-Black individuals when it comes to confronting racism look incredibly different, and that the bulk of that work has to come from non-Black individuals. But I hope that today you learned how Black individuals can internalize racism and how that can translate into perpetuating prejudices or sustaining oppressive systems, and that you'll tune in next Sunday when we conclude the series and discuss how to be an anti-racist. So what you can do to address some of the problems that I talked about in this video, as well as all of my other videos. But I hope to see you next Sunday. Bye.